Hello, I am Logan, and I am going to be going over tariffs and its relationship with the supply chain management market as a whole. But to understand the relationships between these two entities, tariffs and supply chain management, we sort of have to take a dive on what each of these really are. So, first and foremost, what are tariffs? Tariffs are taxes and fees that are imposed by a government, typically on goods that are being imported into the country from foreign nations. These fees are typically placed on the foreign company to pay, which would then allow that foreign company to have the ability to export into the said country and sell their products or services in the country that enacted these tariffs. So, simply put, they are fees for exports, and if they are not paid by the other country, they cannot sell goods. And while this may just seem like an odd fee to some people, they do have a general purpose and idea behind them. And the purposes of these typically align with two different main ideas. The first purpose would be to simply help control the company's imports from certain countries, which this allows the domestic country to have a competitive advantage over said foreign country. This is because the fees that the other company has to pay would typically raise the prices of the foreign company's goods, thus driving more demand towards the domestic market and the domestic companies. A real life example of this that we are actually seeing today would be President Trump's recently imposed tariffs on many different countries, the main one being China. And the main reason he is really imposing these tariffs is because of the recent trade wars that have been going on between the U.S. and a lot of different Asian markets, especially China. And whether or not these tariffs are really seen as effective or not, the idea behind the tariffs remain the same. It is simply to try and give the domestic companies and domestic market a competitive advantage over these Chinese companies, which have access to very, very cheap labor, as many people are aware of. Though another reason a country would impose tariffs is to sort of control the ins and outs of imports and exports for the main purpose of making sure there are not any surpluses or shortages in any certain good. A example of this would be the tariffs that are enacted in most every country regarding the agricultural market. They are enacted by most every country as it's an easy way. These tariffs are an easy way to make sure that there are no surpluses in any certain food, as well as no famines. It's just a very, very easy way for a country to control their markets. Now, this being said, tariffs have a very large effect on the supply chain market, as well as the companies themselves that have these supply chain branches. When a tariff, or at that point, any fees get placed on a company, the supply chain feels the effects of these fees. But to understand how exactly they feel the impact, we sort of have to gauge an understanding of what supply chain really even is, as many people haven't heard of it. And supply chain management isn't anything very complicated as to understanding it. It's simply the analysis of the inflows of materials and the outflows of goods and services and companies. So essentially, it tracks the sales of a company as well as the gain in assets of a company. And in any sort of event, such as a tariff or fees or pandemics, affect the way a good is sold, the supply chain is one of the first branches in a company to feel the impact of it. Given every supply chain manager is anticipating and expected to anticipate some slight changes in the market, the recent tariffs that the U.S. has seen, as well as a few examples that I will go over in the past, definitely are swept under the rug and not expected by many companies, especially for smaller companies that don't have a great supply chain management branch and budget for that supply chain management. Those companies will heavily be impacted. And an example of this could be seen during COVID. As the sales of many companies decline, the supply chains of especially a lot smaller companies were just completely disrupted, as they were not at all anticipating these kind of shifts. And after the supply chain management field kind of just got disrupted, the entire company fell apart. And this isn't only true for COVID. This can also be seen actively today with these tariffs being imposed by Donald Trump, as many smaller companies, especially outside of the U.S., who heavily rely on exporting to the U.S., are getting completely bamboozled, sort of in a way, by these tariffs and these fees, and the supply chain branches of these companies are not able to keep up with these sort of changes in prices and sales, and just completely crumble.